and welcome to Word of Grace. If this is your first time here, please subscribe, like, and share this video. If this is your second, third, fourth, however many times you've been here, thank you so much for joining me once again. Also, don't forget to share it and, spread the message. So today, I will be talking about something that I learned with my Bible studies over the week, and really changed my perspectives on a few things. But I just want to share one of those things with you. So over the week, I was reading the book of Esther. And I just feel like everyone knows about Esther. She was a poor orphan, and then she became a queen, and then she saved the people of Israel, and it was amazing. It's just like your fantastic everyday fairy tale, that's what it sounds like. But really, I realized that it's such an important story in the Bible, and just it being there alone is something that we shouldn't even take for granted. Obviously, we shouldn't be taking any stories in the Bible for granted, but I was just like, man, Esther, the book of Esther is so powerful. What I wanted to share with us today is about not missing what God has favored us or placed us in a position of authority or power or of influence to achieve, right? And so obviously we believe that wherever it is that we are, or I believe personally that wherever I go or wherever I'm, blessed enough to be placed, I didn't get there by myself. Yes, I worked hard. Yes, I maybe acquired the skills to even be there. But at the end of the day, I didn't get there on my own. I'm not there because I was the best person for the job. I'm there because God saw that grace should be here to achieve so and so thing in this time. And so, I kept thinking about that in relation to Esther and how she, yes, being an orphan girl and, being with her uncle and all of that and all the things that she went through in her life, basically ended up in the palace. And it's so crazy because what happens is when there's that decree that's sent out. So basically, Sarah is an orphan and basically Esther is an orphan, and Esther lives with her cousin Mordecai, who's taken her in and all of those things. And Mordecai just happens to be a watchman at the king's palace in Susa. And so Mordecai reveals this big plot to kill the king and then all of those things. So the king doesn't reward him. There's no reward for it. It's just like, oh, thank you for saving my life, basically. And that's the end. But then here's where Esther, not Sarah, Esther's story really comes in, right? So the queen at the time defies the king, and he's advised, okay, you need to step her down and you need to bring another queen in, because this is going to be a big thing. All the women in the land will be like, oh, I don't need to respect my husband because even the queen does not respect the king. So anyway, she stepped down, the whole lot, rah, 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 all of those things. Now, Esther is brought into the palace, and immediately, she's favored. As in, like, everyone that sees her is like, yeah, this one, we like her. So even the guy that's preparing all these wonderful young women to go and meet the king, for the king to basically assess, spend the night with them, and then decide, oh, this is going to be a queen or not, even he favors Esther. And so then from the very beginning to the middle to the end, everything. So Esther is given like special instructions, like things to do that will please the king, all of those things. It's so crazy because it's not like this guy that is watching over everybody knew Esther. Okay, this guy isn't Esther's cousin. This guy doesn't know Esther from anywhere. At least the Bible doesn't mention it. But Esther just finds favor in his eyes. And so he just gives Esther his full support, telling her you can do this and you can do this and you can do this. And every advice that he gives to Esther basically helps her. And in the end, she becomes queen. Now, when she becomes queen, there's this man called Haman who becomes like the second in command and wants to kill everybody. Okay, Haman's bad. He's the bad guy. He wants to kill everybody. And The thing that really struck me in all of that is that there's like a series of messages that goes between Esther and her cousin Mordecai. And Esther is saying to them, you know, surely there's something we can do, all of those things. And then Mordecai says, yes, you have to go to the king and you have to tell the king to save your people. Now, here's something you should know. They did not know that Esther they didn't know that Esther was a Jew, and so that in itself is a count against her, because the decree that Haman does this whole thing, and then there's a decree that all the Jews must be killed on the 7th of March and blah 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 blah, and so that in itself is against Esther, who's a Jew, but she's the queen. And so her cousin goes, you can go to your husband and you can have a talk to him and say to him, husband, please save my people. And he's your husband, so he will listen to you. Now, Esther is so filled with fear. And here's where we need to now take it into account, like into our own lives, right? There are places that we are put, that we're placed of high authority, where we didn't get there mainly because of our merit, mainly because we were beautiful, or mainly because we did this, or mainly because we were put there because we were needed there for a certain time. So a time is coming where that place that you are, God is going to need you to step up and do something that is going to save a soul, or save a nation, or save a country, save a family, whatever it is, it's going to save something, right? And so God has put you in that place because in that time that is coming, you are going to save a people. The time comes for Esther to do what it is that she was sent into the palace to do, which was to save her people and to save the people of God, right? So there's this whole conversation that passes on with like Mordecai saying, yep, now you have to do this. And then Esther going, oh, I'm a bit scared, you know, the king hasn't called for me in such a long time, and I can't go, you know, into his presence without being called. And what if I go and I perish? And Mordecai's like, you're going to perish anyway if you don't go. So, you know, like just do it. But then there's a thing that really strikes me, right? And this is in verse 4, chapter 13, if I remember correctly. Let's just go see. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. I love that verse because for me, it's a reminder that God places us in places, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have any other cards. It doesn't mean that he can't make something else happen. You know, like the point was always to save his people from that time when Haman was going to make that decree for them to get killed. And Esther was in the perfect place to save them. However, if Esther was going to not do what she had been placed there to do, there was always going to be relief for the people of God, whether it was through Esther or not. Esther was that person that had been destined at that time to do that. And if she wasn't going to do it, someone else would do it from somewhere. Somehow it was going to happen. And it's, for me, I was just like, man, it makes me think about how God is like, Grace, or even yourself, you personalize it. But God says, Grace, I've called you in this time to do this thing, in this place, in this moment. However, if you don't do it, I have appointed someone else. I have made provision for something else to happen that will it's just going to make sure that what I've planned to do happens. Whether you do it or someone else does it, it's going to happen. And so then it's like, man, that's my part. So it's up to me to then make myself obedient and humble myself enough to say, God, in this time and for this reason and for this thing that you have called me here to do, I will obey, I will be obedient, and I will do it. And then the other thing that it says in that same verse is that if you don't do it, right, you and your family will perish. You and your relatives will perish. Now, I don't think he was talking about the king. It's probably talking about Esther's children. Not that there's any mention of Esther and having children in the palace, but I imagine that it would be them and whoever else is serving Esther at the time. And so what we don't realize is that there are people around us that when we don't do what we've been called to do, they perish, they suffer, they live through the consequences. So it's not just you. You're not the only person that suffers through whatever or goes through the consequences. It's you and your family, you and your relatives, you and whoever has been placed underneath you, you and whoever is serving with you at that time, you and whoever has been attached to that ministry or that place or that area that you're serving. And so it's like, at the end of the day, it's all about our obedience and being able to listen and being attentive, and not saying once you get to where you think is, the highest of the highs, that you don't get there and say, well, I got here by myself, because you didn't get there by yourself. You were sent there to accomplish a purpose. You were sent there for a mission. You were sent there for a time. And I love the saying so much, that I was created for such a time as this. And that's something that I say to myself every single day. And what that does is it reminds me that whatever it is that I'm going through today, I've been created for that. Wherever it is that I'm being called to serve today, I've been made for that. Wherever it is that I may go tomorrow, whatever it is that I may encounter, I've just been made for that, right? And so wherever it is that I go, whatever it is that I do, I have to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that glorifies God. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's difficult. I don't always get it right, and you won't always get it right. There are times when your will and your need and your anger and your unhappiness and the fact that you expected this and all of that, there are times when that's going to come in. I know for me, for a lot of times, I've just been like, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not God. I can't do it. I don't have that patience. I don't have that strength. I just can't. And I've walked out. Whereas I know if I'd stayed, something would have worked out. But it's that knowledge, that awareness that this is what I've been made for, or this is what I've been created for, this is where God is calling me to serve, or this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's that knowledge and that awareness of that, and for us to continue to live in that, right? So this whole message, the entirety of this video is about us living in that knowledge that we have been called for such a time as this. So wherever it is today that God has placed you, whatever authority, whatever position, whether it's in leadership, whether it's to serve, whether it's to polish shoes, whether it's to give people food, whether it's to clean plates, whether it's to write numbers, whether it's to order people about, whatever it is that wherever it is that you've been placed to serve today, I want to encourage you to do it diligently. And I want to encourage you to always stay in tune with the Holy Spirit. Like whatever it is that the Holy Spirit is saying to you, being aware of that and being open to that. Don't close yourself off because you feel like you've achieved what you need to achieve, because you feel like, yep, I've done it. This is where I'm supposed to be. I've gotten there and this is all about me now. And God did. God got you there. God can bring you down. The same way you got there is the same way you can come down. There's always someone else. There's always another assignment. There's always something else that can take over what you have. And just that knowledge alone is humbling. My people, it's humbling. And so we need to be humble enough to just live a life that is pleasing, right? Not just to man, but to God, especially to God. And so guys, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I pray that this week will be a blessed week for you, that wherever you go, that you will obtain favor, that people will call on you, and that people will look for you, and that whatever it is that God has assigned you to do this week, wherever he sends you, that you will be able to accomplish that we will all be able to be obedient to the voice of God. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again next week.